Margaret Collins stood in her kitchen staring at the garage door for the fifth time that morning. 2 years had passed since Frank died, and she still could not bring herself to clean out his space. The neighbors had been kind, but she knew they whispered about the overgrown yard and the garage that never opened anymore. Today felt different, though, and she finally grabbed the keys from the hook by the door. The garage smelled like motor oil, and something else she could not identify. Frank had always been secretive about his work at the aerospace company, but she never questioned it much. He came home tired most days and spent hours in the garage working on projects he never talked about. She assumed it was just his way of unwinding after long days designing airplane parts. Margaret flipped the light switch and gasped. The space was nothing like she remembered from quick glimpses years ago. Instead of the usual garage clutter, she expected to find tools and car parts everywhere. The walls were lined with metal shelving holding objects that looked nothing like anything she had ever seen. Strange crystalline shapes caught the light and threw rainbow patterns across the concrete floor. Smooth metallic devices sat next to what appeared to be rocks that glowed with a soft blue light. She walked deeper into the garage and found Frank's workbench covered with notebooks, filled with his careful handwriting. The pages contained diagrams of objects that matched some of the strange items on the shelves. Mathematical equations covered every margin, and Frank had written notes in what looked like several different languages. Some symbols did not look like any alphabet she recognized from her years teaching elementary school. Behind the workbench, she discovered a filing cabinet she had never noticed before. The top drawer was locked, but Frank had always hidden spare keys in predictable places. She found this one taped under the bottom drawer and opened the cabinet to reveal folders labeled with codes like Project Harmony and Initiative Welcome. Each folder contained photographs of objects similar to those on the shelves, along with technical drawings and reports written in Frank's neat printing. The strangest discovery waited in the bottom drawer. A sealed envelope with her name written in Frank's handwriting sat alone in the otherwise empty space. Below her name, Frank had written a single line of instructions. Open only if something unusual happens with my collection. Margaret held the envelope up to the light but could not see through the thick paper. She set it aside and continued exploring. Near the back wall, she found what appeared to be Frank's attempt at organization. He had created a map of the garage with each shelf numbered and labeled. The labels made no sense to her, though. Terms like Zephyrian Healing, Stones, and Arcturus Communication Matrix meant nothing, but Frank had written detailed notes about each item, including what appeared to be care instructions. Margaret picked up one of the glowing rocks and was surprised by how warm it felt. The moment she touched it, the blue light grew brighter, and she could swear she felt a gentle vibration running through the stone. She quickly put it back on the shelf and noticed that several other objects seemed to respond to her presence. A set of metallic rings began to spin slowly when she walked past them, and a crystal formation started humming a low, musical note. The overwhelming nature of the discovery made her sit down on Frank's old stool near the workbench. Her quiet husband, who complained about the price of groceries and fell asleep watching television every night, had apparently been hiding an entire secret life in their garage. The objects clearly were not normal, and some appeared to be responding to her in ways that made her skin crawl with unease. She decided she needed help understanding what Frank had left behind, but did not know who to trust with something so strange. The logical first step seemed to be getting rid of everything. Margaret had never been one to keep clutter around anyway, and whatever Frank had been doing was clearly over now. She could sell everything in a garage sale and let someone else worry about the unusual collection. That evening, Margaret posted an advertisement online for an estate sale, focusing on unique collectibles and vintage items. She avoided mentioning how strange the objects actually were, and instead described them as an eclectic collection from a longtime aerospace engineer. The responses came quickly, with several people expressing interest in seeing the items before the sale. Margaret spent the next day photographing some of the less unusual-looking pieces for additional online listings. The camera seemed to have trouble focusing on certain objects, and some items appeared different in photographs than they did in person. She attributed this to poor lighting and her unfamiliarity with the digital camera her daughter had given her last Christmas. By Thursday evening, she had received dozens of inquiries about the sale, including several offers to buy the entire collection sight unseen. The amounts mentioned in these emails shocked her. People were offering thousands of dollars for what appeared to be Frank's hobby collection. Margaret began to suspect that her husband might have been involved in something more valuable than she had realized. Friday morning brought the first visitor. A young man who looked to be in his 30s knocked on her front door exactly at 9 in the morning. He introduced himself as Alex Carter and explained that he had driven all night from Chicago after seeing her online listing. His intense interest in viewing the items immediately struck Margaret as unusual, but she led him to the garage anyway. Alex stepped into the garage and stopped moving entirely. His eyes went wide as he scanned the shelves, and Margaret watched his expression change from curiosity to what looked like recognition. He approached the glowing stones carefully and examined them without touching. When he turned back to face her, his entire demeanor had shifted from that of a casual buyer to something much more serious. Margaret felt a chill run down her spine as Alex asked her specific questions about Frank and his work. The young man seemed to know more about the objects in her garage than she did, and his careful examination of each item suggested knowledge that went beyond casual interest. She realized that Frank's secret collection might be more significant than a simple hobby, and that Alex Carter might represent the unusual something that Frank had warned her about in his letter. Alex Carter moved through Margaret's garage like he was walking through a museum he had visited many times before. He stopped at each shelf and examined the objects with a familiarity that made Margaret increasingly uncomfortable. When he reached the spinning metallic rings, his hand hovered over them without making contact, and Margaret could see his lips moving as if he was counting or reciting something under his breath. Margaret cleared her throat and asked Alex how he had learned about her sale so quickly. He paused his examination and turned to face her with an expression that seemed much older than his apparent age. Alex explained that he monitored estate sales and online listings for specific types of items that occasionally appeared when people cleaned out the belongings of deceased relatives. His answer was polite but vague in a way that made Margaret more suspicious rather than reassured. Alex approached the glowing blue stones, and this time he did reach out to touch one. The moment his fingers made contact, the stone's light intensified dramatically, and Margaret heard a sound like distant music coming from somewhere she could not identify. Alex quickly pulled his hand back and looked at Margaret with what appeared to be concern mixed with excitement. Margaret demanded to know what was happening and why the objects were responding to both of them. Alex hesitated for a long moment before asking her to sit down. He explained that the items in her garage were not collectibles or art pieces, but rather gifts and tools from people who were not originally from Earth. Margaret laughed nervously and suggested that Alex might be confused about what he was looking at. Alex walked to the workbench and picked up one of Frank's notebooks. He opened it to a page covered with symbols and diagrams and pointed to a particular drawing. The image showed the same metallic rings that were still spinning slowly on their shelf. Below the drawing, Frank had written detailed notes about something called quantum communication protocols and included what appeared to be operating instructions. Margaret stared at the notebook and then at Alex. She asked him directly how he could possibly know what Frank's private notes contained. Alex closed the notebook and set it down carefully before answering that he had worked with Frank for over 15 years. Margaret felt her legs go weak because Frank had never mentioned anyone named Alex Carter in all their years of marriage. Alex continued his explanation by telling Margaret that Frank had been part of a small group of humans who served as liaisons between Earth and several species from other planets. The aerospace company where Frank worked was a cover for his real job, which involved facilitating communication and trade between Earth's governments and what Alex called the Galactic Cooperative. Margaret sat down heavily on Frank's stool and told Alex that he was either crazy or lying. She explained that Frank came home every day complaining about boring engineering projects and office politics. He never traveled anywhere exotic and spent his evenings watching game shows and working in the garden. Alex nodded sympathetically and said that Frank had been very good at maintaining his cover identity. Alex offered to prove his claims by demonstrating one of the communication devices. He approached a crystal formation that Margaret had noticed seemed to hum when she walked past it. Alex placed both hands on the crystal and spoke several words in a language that sounded like nothing Margaret had ever heard. The crystal began to glow brighter, and suddenly the garage filled with a sound like radio static. The static cleared and a voice came from the crystal speaking in accented but clear English. The voice asked Alex to identify himself and report his status. Alex responded by giving a series of numbers and codes before explaining that he was at Frank's location with Frank's widow. The voice expressed sympathy for Frank's death and asked if the transition protocols were being followed properly. Margaret stared at the crystal in shock as Alex concluded his conversation, and the device returned to its previous quiet state. Alex turned to face her, and she could see that his eyes were not quite the right color to be entirely human. They held flecks of silver that seemed to move independently and reflected light in a way that reminded her of cat eyes in darkness. Alex apologized for deceiving her about his nature and explained that he was half human on his mother's side. His father belonged to a species that had been working with Earth's governments for over 60 years. Alex had been born on Earth and raised here, but his mixed heritage made him valuable as a translator and cultural bridge between humans and the various species that comprised the Galactic Cooperative. Margaret asked Alex why Frank had never told her about any of this. Alex explained that the secrecy was necessary for the safety of everyone involved. Most humans were not ready to learn about contact with other species, and those who did know were required to maintain strict confidentiality. Frank had wanted to tell her many times, but his oath of service prevented him from sharing the truth. Alex walked back to the shelves and began pointing out specific items while explaining their origins. The glowing stones were healing crystals from a species called the Zephyrians, who specialized in medical technology. The spinning rings were communication devices that could send messages across vast distances instantly. Several other objects were diplomatic gifts that represented formal agreements between Earth and various alien governments. Margaret struggled to process everything Alex was telling her. She asked him what was supposed to happen to Frank's collection now that he was gone. Alex explained that normally these items would have been retrieved immediately after Frank's death, but there had been administrative delays in the handover process. Margaret's decision to sell the items had triggered monitoring systems that alerted Alex to come and secure them. Alex offered to purchase everything in the garage for a sum that would have paid off Margaret's mortgage and left her financially comfortable for the rest of her life. He explained that the items needed to be returned to their respective owners and that Margaret would be compensated generously for her cooperation and discretion. Margaret looked around the garage at all the strange objects that had been part of Frank's secret life. She thought about her quiet husband who had apparently been carrying the weight of interplanetary diplomacy while pretending to worry about lawn care and grocery bills. The enormity of Frank's hidden responsibilities made her feel like she had never really known him at all. Alex waited patiently while Margaret considered his offer. She realized that accepting his money and forgetting about everything would be the safe and sensible choice. But something about the way the objects responded to her presence made her hesitate. Margaret asked Alex what would happen if she wanted to learn more about Frank's work, instead of simply walking away from it. Margaret held Frank's sealed envelope in her trembling hands while Alex watched her with patient curiosity. She had decided that learning about her husband's secret life was more important than any amount of money Alex might offer. The envelope felt heavier than it should have, and she noticed that Frank had sealed it with wax rather than simply licking the flap. She broke the seal carefully and unfolded several pages of Frank's familiar handwriting. The letter began with an apology for keeping such enormous secrets from her, and an explanation that his silence had been necessary to protect both her and the delicate relationships he had spent decades building. Frank wrote that if she was reading the letter, then something had happened, to make his collection visible to people who understood its true nature. Frank's letter revealed that 30 years earlier, he had been recruited by a joint task force representing several world governments. His engineering background and psychological profile had made him suitable for a program that very few people knew existed. Earth had been contacted by representatives of something called the Galactic Cooperative and needed humans who could serve as ambassadors and technical liaisons. The letter explained that Earth was considered unusual by galactic standards. Most species develop space travel and interplanetary communication through collective intelligence and highly advanced computational systems. Humans were different because they solved problems through individual creativity and adaptation, rather than predetermined algorithms. This made human thinking valuable for situations that required innovative approaches. Frank wrote that his primary job had been documenting human innovations and cultural practices that other species found fascinating or useful. He had spent years cataloging everything from human music and art to emergency medical techniques and engineering solutions that alien minds could not replicate easily. The garage contained gifts and tools provided by 12 different species who had worked with him over the decades. Margaret paused in her reading to look at Alex, who was examining one of the crystal formations with obvious familiarity. She asked him if he had known Frank personally, and Alex nodded before explaining that Frank had been like a mentor to him. Alex had been assigned to work with Frank when he was barely out of training, and Frank had taught him how to navigate the complex relationships between human and alien cultures. Margaret returned to the letter where Frank described each category of objects in the garage and their significance. The Zephyrian healing crystals could accelerate recovery from injuries and illnesses by stimulating cellular regeneration. The Arcturus communication devices allowed instantaneous contact across interstellar distances. Various other items represented formal treaties, cultural exchanges, and technological partnerships between Earth and alien civilizations. Frank's letter contained detailed instructions for caring for each type of object, along with warnings about which items were dangerous if handled improperly. He had included maps showing where everything was located and codes that would allow authorized personnel to retrieve sensitive materials safely. Margaret realized that Frank had been maintaining what amounted to a diplomatic embassy in their suburban garage. The most shocking revelation came in the final pages of Frank's letter. He explained that Margaret's presence would likely activate some of the alien technology, because she carried genetic markers that made her compatible with certain types of psychic interfaces. Frank wrote that he had suspected this for years, but had never been able to test his theory safely. Her natural empathy and intuitive problem-solving abilities were traits that several alien species found particularly valuable in humans. Margaret set down the letter and looked around the garage with new understanding. The objects had been responding to her because she possessed some kind of natural ability to interface with alien technology. Frank had known this might happen, but had been unable to prepare her properly due to the secrecy requirements of his work. Alex confirmed that Margaret's reactions to the various devices were consistent with someone who had latent psychic sensitivity. Alex explained that roughly 1 in 10,000 humans showed some degree of compatibility with alien mental interface technology. These individuals were enormously valuable as translators and cultural bridges because they could understand alien thought patterns more easily than typical humans. Frank had likely been selected for his original assignment partly because he carried these genetic markers even though his own abilities had been minimal. Margaret asked Alex what this meant for her future and whether she would be expected to continue Frank's work. Alex explained that the choice was entirely hers, but that Frank's position would need to be filled by someone eventually. The ongoing relationships between Earth and the galactic cooperative required human representatives who could understand both cultures and facilitate communication between them. Margaret walked to the shelf containing the Zephyrian healing crystals and touched one experimentally. The blue glow intensified immediately, and she felt a warm sensation spreading through her hand and up her arm. The feeling was not unpleasant, but rather reminded her of the way sunlight felt on her skin during summer mornings. Alex watched her reaction carefully and nodded with approval. Alex told Margaret that her natural compatibility with the crystals was stronger than Frank's had been. Most humans required extensive training to achieve even basic communication with alien technology, but Margaret seemed to have an intuitive understanding of how the devices worked. This suggested that she might be exceptionally gifted in ways that would make her extremely valuable as a liaison. Margaret asked Alex to show her how Frank had typically used the communication system. Alex approached the large crystal formation and placed his hands on its surface while speaking the same strange words she had heard earlier. This time, when the voice responded, Alex asked it to explain the current status of Earth's relationships with the cooperative species. The voice reported that Earth's integration into the galactic cooperative was proceeding smoothly despite Frank's death. Several species had expressed interest in expanding cultural and technological exchanges with humanity. However, there were also concerns about a militant faction within the cooperative that viewed Earth's rapid advancement as potentially threatening to galactic stability. Margaret listened to this conversation with growing amazement and anxiety. Frank had apparently been part of negotiations and relationships that affected the entire human race. The responsibility of his position suddenly seemed overwhelming, and she wondered how her quiet husband had managed to carry such weight while maintaining his cover. As an ordinary suburban engineer, Alex concluded his conversation and turned to face Margaret. He explained that Frank's death had created a significant gap in Earth's diplomatic capabilities. While there were other human liaisons working with different species, Frank had been the primary contact for the most important relationships. His replacement would need to be someone with both technical knowledge and the psychic sensitivity required to communicate effectively. Margaret realized that Alex was subtly suggesting that she might be able to fill Frank's role. The idea terrified her, but she also felt a strange sense of obligation to continue her husband's work. Frank had dedicated his life to building bridges between humanity and alien civilizations, and his death should not be allowed to damage those relationships. Margaret told Alex that she needed time to process everything she had learned and to decide what she wanted to do next. Alex agreed and offered to remain nearby in case she needed assistance or protection. He explained that Frank's collection would attract attention from both human and alien authorities, now that its existence was becoming known. Margaret spent the night reading through Frank's notebooks and trying to understand the scope of what her husband had been involved in for 30 years. The technical diagrams and alien symbols made little sense to her, but Frank's personal observations about different species and their cultures were fascinating. He had written detailed notes about alien psychology, social structures, and the various ways they approached problem-solving differently than humans. The next morning, Margaret decided she needed to understand how the communication devices worked before making any decisions about her future. Alex had spent the night in his car parked across the street and came to the garage when she called him. He offered to give her a basic tutorial on operating the alien technology safely. Alex began by showing Margaret how to activate the translation matrix, which would allow her to understand alien languages. The device looked like a headband made of flexible metal with small crystal nodes positioned along its length. When Margaret put it on, she immediately felt a strange tingling sensation in her skull, and suddenly she could understand the alien symbols in Frank's notebooks as clearly as English text. Margaret gasped as the meaning of Frank's technical diagrams became clear to her. He had been working on projects involving faster-than-light communication, medical technology that could extend human lifespan significantly, and energy systems that could solve Earth's environmental problems permanently. The implications were staggering, and she began to understand why such work had required absolute secrecy. Alex taught Margaret how to operate the basic functions of the communication crystals and healing stones. Each device required a specific combination of mental focus and physical contact to activate properly. Margaret found that she could control the alien technology more easily than Alex had expected, and her natural abilities seemed to be stronger than Frank's had been. While Margaret was experimenting with a small communication device, she accidentally activated what Alex later identified as an emergency beacon. The device began emitting a pulsing red light and a high-pitched tone that neither of them knew how to stop. Alex quickly checked Frank's notebooks and found the shutdown procedure, but not before the beacon had transmitted for several minutes. Alex looked concerned as he explained that the emergency beacon was designed to summon help when human liaisons were in danger. The signal would have been received by every cooperative ship within several light years, and they would assume that Frank was calling for immediate assistance. Alex estimated that they had perhaps 6 hours before alien ships began arriving in Earth's solar system. Margaret asked Alex what would happen when the alien ships arrived, and found that Frank was dead. Alex explained that the situation could become very complicated very quickly. The aliens would want to know what had happened to Frank, and whether his replacement was prepared to continue his work. If they perceived that Earth's diplomatic relationships were in danger, they might take steps to protect their interests. Alex used the main communication crystal to contact his superiors and report the accidental activation of the emergency beacon. The conversation was brief, but Margaret could tell from Alex's expression that the response was not reassuring. After ending the call, Alex explained that several government agencies were being notified, and that Margaret's house would likely be surrounded by official personnel within hours. Margaret felt overwhelmed by the rapid escalation of events. 24 hours earlier, she'd been planning a simple garage sale, and now she was apparently at the center of an interplanetary crisis. She asked Alex what she should do to minimize The chaos, and Alex suggested that they prepare for the arrival of both human and alien authorities. Alex helped Margaret organize Frank's most important documents and secure the more dangerous alien devices in a locked cabinet. He explained that some of the technology could be harmful if handled by people without proper training, and that government officials would likely want to confiscate everything regardless of its diplomatic importance. By noon, Margaret could see unmarked vehicles parked at both ends of her street, and men in dark suits watching her house from multiple positions. Alex confirmed that federal agents had arrived and were establishing a perimeter around the area. He warned Margaret that the agents would likely have orders to secure all alien technology and might not be concerned about maintaining Earth's diplomatic relationships. Margaret asked Alex whether the arriving alien ships would be visible to ordinary people and whether the general public would learn about contact with other species. Alex explained that most alien ships had cloaking technology that would hide them from casual observation, but that government satellites and military radar would definitely detect their presence. At 3 p.m, Alex's communication device activated automatically, and a voice began speaking in urgent tones. Alex translated for Margaret that 3 different ships were approaching Earth's solar system at high speed and would arrive within 2 hours. The ships represented different species, and they were all responding to Frank's emergency signal by bringing diplomatic and medical personnel. Margaret watched through her kitchen window as more government vehicles arrived and men with military bearing began setting up equipment in her neighbors' yards. Alex explained that the authorities were probably preparing for first contact protocols. Even though contact with alien species had actually been ongoing for decades, the emergency beacon had apparently triggered responses that would make secrecy impossible to maintain. Alex received another communication informing him that the first alien ship had entered Earth's atmosphere and was requesting permission to land. The ship belonged to the Zephyrians, who had been among Frank's closest alien allies, and they were deeply concerned about his well-being. Alex asked Margaret whether she felt ready to meet representatives from another species. Margaret realized that she was about to become humanity's primary contact with aliens during what could be a very delicate situation. She had no training in diplomacy and only basic understanding of the alien technology, but Alex assured her that her natural empathy and common sense would be valuable assets. He reminded her that Frank had started his career with similar limitations and had become highly successful through patience and genuine curiosity about alien cultures. The first knock on Margaret's door came from federal agents who identified themselves as representatives of a joint task force dealing with unusual national security matters. They requested permission to enter her home and secure any dangerous materials. Margaret allowed them inside but insisted that Alex remain with her as an advisor, since he understood the alien technology better than anyone else present. The federal agents were professional but clearly uncomfortable with the situation. They had protocols for dealing with various types of threats, but nothing in their training had prepared them for managing active diplomatic relationships with multiple alien species. Margaret found herself in the unusual position of trying to reassure government officials while preparing to meet aliens who were coming to help her. Alex's communication device activated again, and he announced that the Zephyrian ship had landed in a field approximately 10 miles from Margaret's house. The aliens were requesting immediate contact with Frank or his designated replacement. Alex looked at Margaret and explained that she would need to make a decision quickly about whether she was willing to serve as Earth's representative during this crisis. Margaret thought about Frank and the decades he had spent building relationships with alien species, while maintaining the pretense of an ordinary life. She realized that her husband had sacrificed his privacy and peace of mind to serve humanity's interests and that his work was too important to abandon due to fear or confusion. Margaret told Alex that she was ready to meet the aliens and do whatever was necessary to prevent an interplanetary incident. Margaret rode in a government vehicle toward the landing site with Alex beside her and 2 federal agents in the front seats. The agents had briefed her on basic security protocols but admitted they had no specific procedures for civilian participation in alien contact situations. Margaret wore the translation headband hidden under a scarf and carried a small communication crystal in her pocket so she could stay in contact with Alex if they were separated. The landing site was a farmer's field that had been quickly cordoned off by military personnel. Margaret could see a large object in the center of the field that looked like a cross between an airplane and a building. The ship was roughly the size of a house and seemed to be made of a smooth white material that reflected sunlight in unusual ways. Several smaller vehicles were positioned around the ship, but no aliens were visible from their approach position. Alex explained that the Zephyrians preferred to conduct initial meetings inside their ships where they could control environmental conditions. Their species had evolved in a different atmospheric mixture than Earth, and while they could survive in Earth's environment, they were more comfortable in their own regulated air. Margaret would be invited aboard the ship for formal introductions and preliminary discussions. A second government vehicle arrived, carrying officials from the State Department and National Security Agency. Margaret was introduced to Director Patricia Lewis, who would serve as the government's primary representative during the contact situation. Director Lewis explained that this was technically not first contact since relationships with alien species had been ongoing, but it was the first time those relationships would be acknowledged openly by official channels. Margaret asked Director Lewis what the government's position would be regarding continued cooperation with alien species. Director Lewis explained that policy decisions would be made at much higher levels than her authority, but that maintaining peaceful relationships was obviously preferable to potential conflict. Margaret sensed that the government officials were as confused about the situation as she was. Alex's communication device activated, and he reported that 2 additional alien ships had arrived in Earth's orbital space. The second ship belonged to a species called the Centaurians, who were known for their advanced engineering capabilities. The third ship represented the Andromedan Collective, which was described as a loose alliance of several smaller species. All 3 groups had been close allies of Frank and were concerned about the implications of his emergency signal. Director Lewis asked Alex whether the alien ships posed any threat to Earth's security. Alex assured her that all 3 species had been peaceful partners with humanity for decades, and that their arrival was motivated by concern for Frank's safety rather than aggressive intentions. However, Alex also warned that misunderstandings during first contact situations could escalate quickly if proper protocols were not followed. Margaret and the official delegation approached the Zephyrian ship on foot. A section of the ship's smooth surface dissolved into an opening, large enough for several people to walk through simultaneously. Margaret was surprised to see that the interior of the ship looked almost familiar, with corridors and rooms arranged in patterns that seemed designed for human comfort rather than alien convenience. The first Zephyrian Margaret met introduced herself as Commander Lisa Zhang, though Alex quietly explained that this was a translated name chosen for human convenience. The commander appeared humanoid in general shape, but was taller than any human Margaret had ever seen, with pale blue skin and large dark eyes. Her voice had a musical quality that reminded Margaret of wind chimes when she spoke English. Commander Zhang expressed deep sorrow about Frank's death and asked Margaret to confirm the circumstances of his passing. Margaret explained that Frank had died of natural causes related to heart disease, and that his death had not been connected to his diplomatic work in any way. The commander seemed relieved by this information and thanked Margaret for continuing Frank's responsibilities during the transition period. Director Lewis asked Commander Zhang about the nature of the relationships between her species and humanity. The commander explained that the Zephyrians valued Earth highly as a source of creative problem-solving and cultural innovation. Human approaches to art, music, and social cooperation had provided insights that helped Zephyrian society address several significant challenges over the past 3 decades. Margaret was introduced to representatives from the other 2 alien ships who had been transported aboard the Zephyrian vessel for the meeting. Engineer Marcus Rivers represented the Centaurians and appeared to be entirely human, until Margaret noticed that his eyes had mechanical components that clicked softly when he focused on different objects. Dr. Sandra Kim represented the Andromedan Collective and looked human except for her skin, which seemed to shimmer with internal light. The alien representatives explained that Frank had served as Earth's primary cultural liaison and had been responsible for documenting human innovations that other species found useful or inspiring. His reports had been distributed throughout the Galactic Cooperative and had significantly enhanced humanity's reputation among spacefaring civilizations. Frank's death represented a serious gap in communication channels that needed to be addressed quickly. Margaret asked why secrecy had been necessary if the relationships were beneficial to both humans and aliens. Commander Jung explained that most human populations were not psychologically prepared for knowledge of alien contact, and that premature disclosure could cause panic or social disruption. The gradual integration approach had been designed to allow humanity time to develop space travel capabilities and cultural maturity. Naturally, Director Lewis asked about the military capabilities of the alien ships and whether humanity should be concerned about potential threats from other species. Engineer Rivers explained that the Galactic Cooperative maintained defensive capabilities, but that their primary focus was on trade, cultural exchange, and mutual assistance. However, he also mentioned that some species viewed humanity's rapid technological advancement as potentially destabilizing. Dr. Kim provided more details about the concerns some alien species had regarding human development. She explained that most species required thousands of years to develop from primitive societies to spacefaring civilizations. Humanity had accomplished the same advancement in only a few centuries, which suggested either exceptional intelligence or dangerous instability. Some alien groups worried that humans might become aggressive as their capabilities increased. Margaret asked whether humanity's membership in the Galactic Cooperative was secure or whether Earth faced potential rejection by alien civilizations. Commander Jung explained that Earth's status was currently under review by the Cooperative Council and that Frank's reports had been crucial in demonstrating humanity's peaceful intentions and valuable contributions. His death had created uncertainty about humanity's future development trajectory. The meeting was interrupted by Alex receiving an urgent communication from government officials still on the ground. He reported that military satellites had detected several additional alien ships approaching Earth's solar system at high speed. These ships did not match the profiles of any known friendly species, and their approach vectors suggested aggressive rather than diplomatic intentions. Commander Jung immediately contacted her ship's systems and confirmed that at least 6 unidentified vessels were entering the outer solar system. The ships belonged to a militant faction within the Galactic Cooperative called the Dominion, who opposed Earth's integration and viewed human technological advancement as a threat to galactic stability. The Dominion had apparently decided to use Frank's death as justification for direct action against humanity. Director Lewis asked what direct action meant and whether Earth was about to be attacked. Engineer Rivers explained that the Dominion typically demanded surrender and submission rather than outright destruction, but that they were prepared to use force if their demands were refused. The situation had escalated far beyond a simple diplomatic crisis and was now becoming a test of humanity's worthiness for continued independence. Margaret realized that her accidental activation of Frank's emergency beacon had triggered a chain of events that could determine the future relationship between humanity and alien civilizations. She asked the alien representatives what options existed for resolving the crisis peacefully. Commander Jung explained that the Dominion would likely demand proof that humanity deserved continued autonomy and membership in the Galactic Cooperative. Dr. Kim added that such proof would need to demonstrate uniquely human capabilities that other species valued highly enough to justify the risks of continued cooperation. Margaret understood that humanity was about to face some kind of test that would determine whether Earth remained free or fell under alien control. The weight of representing her entire species suddenly felt overwhelming, but she knew that Frank would have expected her to rise to the challenge. Margaret sat in the Zephyrian ship's main conference room, surrounded by alien representatives and government officials, while they waited for the Dominion ships to arrive. Commander Jung had activated a 3-dimensional display that showed the positions of all vessels in Earth's solar system. The 6 approaching Dominion ships formed a precise formation that suggested military organization rather than exploratory mission. Commander Jung began explaining the history of humanity's relationship with the Galactic Cooperative to help Margaret and the government officials understand what they were facing. She described how Earth had first been detected by alien monitoring systems nearly a century ago, when human radio broadcasts began reaching other star systems. Most species required thousands of years to develop radio technology, but humanity had progressed with unusual speed. The initial alien response to Earth had been cautious observation rather than direct contact. Most spacefaring civilizations followed strict protocols about interfering with developing species, but humanity's rapid advancement had made them a special case. By the time human technology reached the level where contact became inevitable, Earth had already attracted attention from multiple alien factions with different views about humanity's potential. Dr. Kim explained that the Galactic Cooperative was not a unified government, but rather a loose alliance of species that cooperated on trade and mutual defense issues. Different member species had varying opinions about how to handle contact with developing civilizations. The moderate faction supported gradual integration, while militant groups like the Dominion preferred either complete isolation or direct control of dangerous species. Margaret asked why humanity was considered dangerous when Earth had never attacked alien civilizations or even developed the technology for interstellar travel. Engineer Rivers explained that the concern was not about current human capabilities, but rather about future potential. Humanity's rapid technological advancement combined with their individualistic culture created unpredictability that many alien species found threatening. Commander Zhang provided specific examples of human innovations that had impressed alien observers but also raised concerns about humanity's development trajectory. Human medical technology had advanced faster than most species managed in similar timeframes. Human approaches to engineering problems often involved creative solutions that alien minds had not considered. Human social structures demonstrated both remarkable cooperation and dangerous competitive instincts. Margaret began to understand that Earth was viewed as both valuable and risky by alien civilizations. She asked the representatives to explain what made human thinking different from alien approaches to problem solving. Dr. Kim described how most alien species developed technology through collective intelligence and systematic analysis. Individual creativity was rare among spacefaring civilizations and was often viewed with suspicion. Commander Zhang activated another display that showed examples of human innovations that had been shared throughout the Galactic Cooperative. Margaret was amazed to see that everything from jazz music to emergency medical techniques had been studied and adapted by alien civilizations. Human art forms were particularly valued because they demonstrated ways of thinking that most alien species could not replicate. Naturally, Engineer Rivers explained that human approaches to crisis management were considered uniquely effective by many alien species. When faced with unexpected problems, humans tended to develop creative solutions quickly rather than following predetermined protocols. This adaptability made humans valuable as partners but also unpredictable as potential adversaries. Margaret asked whether the test humanity was about to face would focus on demonstrating peaceful intentions or proving useful capabilities. Commander Zhang explained that the Dominion would likely demand both. They wanted evidence that humanity could contribute meaningfully to galactic civilization without becoming a destabilizing influence. The challenge was that proving human capabilities often involved demonstrating the same traits that made some aliens nervous. Dr. Kim provided more details about what the arriving Dominion ships would expect from humanity. The Dominion typically presented developing species with problems that required immediate solutions and judged their worthiness based on how effectively they responded. These tests were designed to evaluate both intelligence and cultural stability under pressure. Margaret realized that humanity's response to the crisis would need to showcase the best aspects of human nature while avoiding behaviors that might be interpreted as threatening. She asked the alien representatives what specific human traits were most valued by friendly species within the Galactic Cooperative. Commander Zhang listed creativity, adaptability, empathy, and willingness to cooperate across cultural boundaries as particularly important characteristics. Alex received a communication from ground control reporting that the Dominion ships had taken positions around Earth and were broadcasting demands for immediate response from human leadership. The message required Earth's governments to provide proof of humanity's fitness for continued autonomy within 72 hours. If satisfactory evidence was not provided, the Dominion would assume direct control of Earth's development. Director Lewis asked what direct control would mean for humanity's future. Engineer Rivers explained that species under Dominion control typically had their technological advancements severely restricted and their cultural development guided according to predetermined patterns. Independence would be lost and Earth would essentially become a managed colony rather than an equal member of the galactic cooperative. Margaret asked whether other species had successfully passed similar tests and maintained their independence. Commander Zhang confirmed that several civilizations had proven their worth to the Dominion's satisfaction, but noted that each test was designed specifically for the species being evaluated. Humanity's test would focus on the traits that made humans both valuable and potentially dangerous. Dr. Kim explained that the test would likely involve presenting humanity with a crisis that required creative problem-solving and international cooperation. The Dominion would evaluate not just whether humans could solve the problem, but how they approached the challenge and what their solution revealed about human nature and future potential. Margaret began to see the outline of what humanity would need to accomplish. They had to demonstrate that human creativity and adaptability were valuable assets rather than destabilizing threats. The response would need to showcase cooperation between different human cultures and governments while solving a problem in uniquely human ways that impressed alien observers. Commander Zhang warned that the test would be designed to be difficult even by human standards. The Dominion wanted to see how humanity performed under extreme pressure with limited time and resources. Previous tests had involved everything from environmental disasters to complex engineering challenges that required innovative approaches. Margaret asked whether the friendly alien species would be allowed to assist humanity during the test. Engineer Rivers explained that direct assistance was prohibited, but that providing information and moral support was generally acceptable. The test had to demonstrate purely human capabilities in order to be valid. Alex reported that government officials around the world were being briefed on the situation and that emergency protocols were being activated. Margaret realized that she was about to witness humanity's first truly global response to an external threat. The challenge would test not just human intelligence and creativity, but also the species' ability to cooperate when survival was at stake. Margaret thought about Frank and the decades he had spent documenting human achievements for alien audiences. His work had apparently helped convince many species that humanity deserved partnership rather than control. Now it would be up to the entire human race to prove that Frank's faith in his species had been justified. Commander Zhang announced that the Dominion ships were preparing to transmit the specific details of humanity's test. Margaret realized that within hours she might be helping coordinate Earth's response to a challenge that would determine whether humanity remained free or fell under alien supervision. The weight of responsibility felt enormous, but she also felt a growing confidence that humans would find a way to meet whatever challenge they were given. The Dominion's transmission arrived exactly 24 hours after. Their ships had taken position around Earth. Margaret watched the alien message on screens throughout the Cephirian ship while government officials and alien representatives listened to simultaneous translations in multiple languages. The Dominion spokesperson was a tall figure in flowing robes who spoke with mechanical precision that made their translated words sound like a court judgment. The Dominion announced that humanity had been selected for immediate evaluation due to concerns about their rapid technological advancement and unpredictable social development. Earth would face a comprehensive test designed to determine whether humans possessed the wisdom and stability necessary for continued independence within the galactic community. Failure to demonstrate adequate capabilities would result in Dominion supervision of human civilization until such time as proper development could be assured. Margaret listened with growing dread as the Dominion outlined the specific challenge humanity would face. A disabled alien vessel from a neutral species had been discovered drifting in space near the edge of Earth's solar system. The ship contained approximately 300 survivors who required immediate rescue before their life support systems failed completely. Standard rescue protocols had proven ineffective. Due to unusual technical complications, the test would require humanity to mount a rescue mission using primarily Earth-based technology and human problem-solving approaches. Limited technical assistance would be provided by galactic cooperative species. but the solution had to demonstrate uniquely human capabilities. Humanity had exactly 48 hours to reach the disabled vessel and evacuate all survivors successfully. Director Lewis asked why this particular scenario had been chosen as humanity's test. The Dominion spokesperson explained that rescue operations under extreme constraints required precisely the type of creative thinking and adaptability that made humans both valuable and potentially dangerous. The challenge would reveal whether human traits led to beneficial cooperation or destabilizing competition under pressure. Margaret realized that the test was designed to put humanity's best qualities against their worst instincts. The time pressure and technical challenges would require unprecedented international cooperation, while the high stakes would tempt various groups to pursue their own agendas. Success would require humans to work together more effectively than they had ever managed before. Commander Zhang privately explained to Margaret that the disabled vessel belonged to a species called the Meridians, who were known for their advanced medical knowledge but limited engineering capabilities. Their ship had suffered catastrophic system failures that prevented them from repairing their propulsion or life support systems. Conventional rescue approaches had failed because the ship's damaged systems were interfering with standard transportation and communication methods. ACA received reports from around the world describing the initial human responses to the Dominion's challenge. Space agencies from multiple countries were coordinating emergency meetings, while military organizations prepared potential rescue equipment. The United Nations had called an emergency session to coordinate international cooperation and prevent competing national interests from undermining the mission. Margaret asked Commander Zhang whether humanity had any realistic chance of succeeding within the time limit. The commander explained that reaching the disabled ship was technically possible using modified versions of existing human spacecraft, but that the rescue operation would require solving several problems that had stumped alien engineers with centuries more experience. Engineer Rivers provided technical details about the complications affecting the rescue mission. The disabled ship was surrounded by an energy field that prevented standard transportation methods from functioning properly. The survivors could not be evacuated using conventional shuttles or teleportation systems. Any successful rescue would require approaches that circumvented, rather than overcame, these obstacles. Margaret began to see why the Dominion had chosen this particular challenge. The energy field problem could not be solved through superior technology alone, but would require creative thinking and willingness to attempt unconventional approaches. This was exactly the type of situation where human adaptability and innovation provided advantages that more advanced civilizations might lack. Director Lewis reported that the first human response teams were already being assembled at launch facilities around the world. NASA was coordinating with European and Asian space agencies to combine resources and expertise. Private space companies were contributing equipment and technical support. The scale of cooperation was unprecedented in human history. Alex informed Margaret that she was being requested to serve as the primary human liaison with alien technical advisors during the rescue mission. Her natural compatibility with alien communication systems would be essential for coordinating assistance from friendly species. Margaret accepted the responsibility despite feeling completely unprepared for such a crucial role. The next 18 hours passed in a blur of technical briefings and coordination meetings as human teams worked frantically to prepare for the rescue mission. Margaret found herself translating between human engineers and alien technical advisors who were trying to share information about the energy field complications without directly solving the problems for humanity. Margaret was amazed by the level of creativity and determination displayed by human teams around the world. Engineers developed dozens of potential solutions to the transportation problem, while medical teams prepared to treat alien physiology they had never encountered before. Military organizations contributed logistic support without attempting to control the operation for national advantage. Dr. Kim explained that the Meridian survivors were becoming increasingly desperate as their life support systems continued to fail. Time estimates showed that humanity had less than 24 hours to reach them before the situation became fatal. The pressure was intensifying, but human teams continued to develop increasingly innovative approaches to the rescue challenge. Margaret watched human engineers test a radical solution that involved using modified spacecraft to create a resonance pattern that would disrupt the energy field temporarily. The approach was entirely theoretical and required precise coordination between multiple vessels. No alien species had ever attempted anything similar because the risk of failure was considered too high. The Dominion ships maintained their positions around Earth and provided regular updates on the countdown to the rescue deadline. Margaret could sense that the alien observers were watching humanity's response with intense interest. The test was revealing aspects of human nature that would determine Earth's future relationship with galactic civilization. Alex reported that launch preparations were nearly complete and that the rescue fleet would depart Earth within 6 hours. 3 modified spacecraft carrying human crews would attempt to reach the disabled vessel and execute the untested rescue plan. Margaret would accompany the mission as communication coordinator and alien liaison. Margaret realized that she was about to participate in humanity's most important moment since the development of civilization. The success or failure of the rescue mission would determine whether Earth remained free or fell under alien control. The weight of representing her entire species was overwhelming, but she also felt proud of humanity's response to the challenge. The rescue mission represented everything that made humans unique among galactic civilizations: the willingness to attempt dangerous solutions, the ability to cooperate across national boundaries, and the determination to risk everything to save strangers, demonstrated the qualities that had impressed alien observers for decades. Margaret hoped that these traits would be enough to convince the Dominion that humanity deserved continued independence. As the launch countdown entered its final hours, Margaret thought about Frank and the faith he had placed in human potential. His decades of work documenting human achievements had helped prepare the foundation for this moment. Now it was up to the entire human race to prove that his confidence had been justified and that Earth deserved its place among the stars as an equal partner rather than a supervised colony. Margaret strapped herself into the communication station aboard the lead rescue vessel as the 3-ship fleet prepared for launch. The spacecraft had been modified with alien communication equipment and human engineering innovations in less than 36 hours. Around the world, millions of people watched the departure, while governments coordinated the most complex international operation in human history. The journey to the disabled Meridian vessel took 14 hours, during which Margaret maintained constant communication between the human crews and alien technical advisors. Commander Zhang provided updates on the survivors' condition, while Engineer Rivers offered suggestions for adapting human equipment to work around the energy field complications. The cooperation between species felt natural despite the enormous stakes involved. Margaret was impressed by the professionalism and creativity displayed by the human rescue teams. Captain Robert Chen commanded the lead vessel with calm expertise, while his international crew included specialists from 12 different countries. The level of cooperation and shared purpose demonstrated humanity at its absolute best. As they approached the disabled alien vessel, Margaret could see the energy field that had prevented previous rescue attempts. The field created a shimmering distortion in space that made the Meridian ship appear to flicker and shift like a mirage. Human sensors detected complex interference patterns that would disrupt most forms of transportation and communication technology. The human solution involved using all 3 rescue ships to create synchronized energy pulses that would temporarily destabilize the interference field. The technique had never been attempted before and required precise timing between vessels separated by thousands of kilometers. Failure could result in the rescue ships being caught in the same trap as the disabled vessel. Margaret coordinated the countdown sequence while monitoring communications from the Meridian survivors. Through the translation matrix, she could hear their voices growing weaker as life support systems continued to fail. The aliens expressed gratitude that anyone was attempting to help them, despite the obvious dangers involved in the rescue operation. Captain Chen initiated the energy pulse sequence, and Margaret watched her instruments as waves of disruption spread through the interference field. For several terrifying minutes, the rescue ships lost contact with each other and with Earth as their own systems were affected by the destabilization process. Margaret felt completely alone in space, surrounded by forces that could destroy them at any moment. The energy field suddenly collapsed, and the Meridian vessel became clearly visible for the first time. Margaret could see that the alien ship was severely damaged with hull breaches and failing power systems. The rescue teams had less than 2 hours to evacuate all survivors before the field would regenerate and trap everyone together. The evacuation process revealed the true genius of human problem-solving under pressure. Instead of using standard transportation methods that would be disrupted by residual interference, human teams deployed a network of physical tethers and emergency pods that could navigate the dangerous environment through purely mechanical means. The approach was crude but effective in ways that more advanced technology could not match. Margaret coordinated communications between rescue teams and Meridian survivors who were being evacuated in small groups. The aliens were amazed by human willingness to risk their own lives to save strangers from an entirely different species. Several Meridians commented that such behavior was rare, even among the most advanced civilizations in the galaxy. The final evacuation runs were completed with only minutes to spare before the energy field began regenerating. All 300 Meridian survivors had been successfully transferred to the human rescue vessels, along with critical data from their disabled ship. The mission had succeeded beyond anyone's expectations and demonstrated human capabilities that impressed even the Dominion observers. The return journey to Earth took place while the entire galaxy watched humanity's first major interstellar rescue operation. Margaret received communications from dozens of alien species, congratulating Earth on the successful mission and expressing interest in expanded cooperation. The rescue had apparently demonstrated human qualities that many civilizations found valuable. Commander Zhang informed Margaret that the Dominion ships were withdrawing from Earth's solar system and transmitting their evaluation results to the Galactic Cooperative Council. The rescue mission had provided exactly the type of evidence needed to prove that humanity deserved continued independence and full membership in the galactic community. Margaret was amazed to learn that the test results exceeded the minimum requirements by significant margins. Human performance during the crisis had demonstrated not just technical competence, but also the cultural stability and cooperative instincts that made species valuable partners rather than potential threats. Earth had passed its evaluation with distinction. The Meridian survivors were transported to medical facilities where human and alien doctors worked together to treat injuries and exposure symptoms. The rescued aliens expressed profound gratitude for human efforts and requested permission to establish a permanent cultural exchange program with Earth. Their species wanted to learn more about the thinking processes that had made their rescue possible. Margaret returned to Earth to find that the world had changed dramatically during the rescue mission. The existence of alien civilizations was now public knowledge, and humanity was adjusting to its new status as a member of the Galactic Cooperative. The transition was surprisingly smooth as people focused on the opportunities rather than the challenges of interstellar contact. Margaret was appointed as Earth's first official ambassador to the Galactic Cooperative and asked to establish a proper diplomatic facility to replace Frank's improvised garage operation. She accepted the position with a mixture of pride and trepidation, knowing that she would be continuing her husband's legacy while helping humanity navigate its new role among the stars. The garage was converted into a small museum displaying some of the alien artifacts that Frank had collected over 3 decades of secret diplomacy. Margaret kept the most significant items in the new embassy facility, where they continued to serve their original purposes as tools for interspecies communication and cooperation. Margaret often thought about Frank and wondered whether he would have been surprised by humanity's performance during the crisis. She decided that her husband had probably expected humans to rise to the challenge because he had spent years documenting exactly the qualities that made the rescue mission possible. Frank's faith in human potential had been proven correct in the most dramatic way imaginable. The months following Earth's integration into the Galactic Cooperative brought constant changes and opportunities. Human innovations in art, medicine, and engineering were being shared throughout the galaxy, while alien knowledge was helping solve problems that had puzzled Earth scientists for generations. The exchange was proving beneficial for all species involved. Margaret established regular cultural exchange programs that brought young humans and aliens together to learn about different approaches to problem-solving and social organization. She was particularly proud of a program that paired human artists with alien creators to develop new forms of expression that neither species could achieve alone. The memorial service for Frank included representatives from 12 different alien species who had worked with him during his years of secret diplomacy. Margaret was moved by their tributes to her husband's dedication and vision. Frank had helped build the foundation for humanity's successful integration into galactic civilization, and his work would be remembered for generations. Margaret stood in her new office at the Earth Embassy, looking out at a view that included both human and alien architecture as the two cultures began to blend naturally. She thought about the journey from discovering strange objects in Frank's garage to representing humanity among the stars. The transformation had been incredible, but felt like a natural continuation of the path Frank had started decades earlier. The future held unlimited possibilities as humanity began to explore its role as a bridge between different ways of thinking and problem-solving. Margaret knew that challenges would arise, but she also had confidence that human adaptability and creativity would continue to serve Earth well in its expanded cosmic neighborhood. Frank's legacy lived on in every successful cooperation between human and alien minds, working together toward common goals.